One of my absolute favorite podcasts is called My First Million by Sean Purie and Sam Parr. I think they're two very accomplished entrepreneurs, very entertaining, great conversations where they talk about, how different entrepreneurs made their first $1 million and what goes into building businesses. They talk about really esoteric, interesting business ideas. It's a fantastic podcast. Highly recommend you go check it out. I've gotten a ton of value out of it over the years. And in the most recent episode, Sean sits down with the man, the myth, the legend, the GOAT of public speaking, Tony Robbins. And I don't consume a ton of Tony Robbins content anymore, but there was a time in my life when I was starting down the path of my personal development journey that I read some of his books, I watched a lot of his speeches, and I was heavily influenced by this man and his content. And it's funny because I went into reading, I remember reading his very first book, or the first book I read of his, and I think it also was his first book, called Awaken the Giant Within. And I went into it thinking, I didn't really have a context for Tony at that point. And I thought this is going to be a lot of hoo-ha, a lot of foofiness, and I was incredibly blown away. I was surprised by the quality and the depth of the insights and commentary in there. And that was the first time I realized, these people who are famous and celebrities, it's very easy to discount them as being shallow or put them into a bucket. But because they're when you see them on the news or in the sound bites, it's so easy to pigeonhole them and think they're an idiot or whatever. They don't know what they're talking about. But the chances are the people that you see up on those stages and doing that stuff, they got there for a reason. And it's probably not that they've been faking it the whole way. There's probably a little bit of quality underneath of it. And that, I was really blown away with Tony, and I've been a big fan of his ever since. But I don't consume a lot of his stuff, but anymore. He has a new book coming out about money and about investing. And honestly, I did not like at all his first book on money, called Money or something like that. I can't think that's what it's called. I didn't think it was a very good book, honestly. I thought it was kind of a money grab. So full transparency on that. But he has a new book, so it's coming out, and so he's doing, the podcast tour, and he goes and he talks to Sean on My First Million. And there was one section in there that I wanted to talk about with you, which I thought really reinforces and helps sets the expectation as an entrepreneur, as a person who's seeking their greatest self, or trying to be a peak performer, of what that actually means in terms of the volume of work and the effort and what goes into it. And Tony tells this story, but he prefaces it by saying, "We are rewarded in public for the things we do in private." We are rewarded in public for the things we practice in private. It's an amazing concept. But he uses this example of Steph Curry. He says Steph Curry takes 500 shots every single day, which is 3,500 shots every week, which is 180,000 shots every year. And he's been practicing for 15 years, which means he's made 2,700,000 practice shots. Now, over the course of his career in his games, he has only made or shot 16,000 shots. And of those, only 3,557 went in. And we consider him to be one of the best, if not the best shooters of all time. And so less than 1/10 of 1% of his shots are actually seen in games. Think about that. 2.7 million practice shots. Only 3,557 of them were in a game and went in. And we consider him to be one of the best of all time. If that is not the perfect illustration of what we are rewarded in public for the things we practice in private, I don't know what is. And it really helps me calibrate the expectations I have of myself as a writer, as a content producer, as an entrepreneur. The things that I do in private, it's when you see an iceberg, you only see 10% of the iceberg. 90% of its mass is below the surface. And I think that is such a powerful mental frame to have when you're taking into any kind of skill acquisition, is that 90% of what you do will go completely unseen, unnoticed. You will not be applauded for it. But your ability to put in that 90% of the work is what allows people to see the 10% and gives you the opportunity to find success in the thing that you're pursuing. And in fact, that what I'm just sharing with the iceberg analogy, that's a 90-10, right? But this Steph Curry example, it's a 99.1 to 0.1 example. 99.9%, I'm sorry, of the iceberg is below the surface. 0.1 is above. That's insane. That's incredible. And it gives me a lot of perspective. I think perspective is a superpower. And a lot of times when we are toiling in silence, when we are in our office and nobody is seeing us, and it feels like we're just banging our head against the wall and nobody will ever care, I find this to be reassuring and as a guidepost that you have to put in the work, and there is no guarantee that the work will pay off. You might make 2,700,000 shots and never make it in the end, but you will never make it if you don't take those shots. So don't stop overthinking it. Go take the shots and see what happens. That's my encouragement to you today, and I hope this brings you a little bit of value. As always, thank you guys for being here. We'll catch you in the next episode, but until then, stay hyper-focused, my friends.